I like stories with unexpected endings, and I found one in Scripture this past week. There's a king of Judah who is terrible. In fact, Scripture says he was worse than all the people who didn't know God at all. He's a horrible king. And as you might expect, God decides, after warning him a bunch of times to change his ways, God decides to punish him. And the punishment is harsh, and the punishment is severe, and it's a really sad ending to the guy's life. Except, it's not the end. The story goes on from there, because the king makes a correction. The king turns his whole life around. And in fact, that bad ending turns into a good one. This story about a guy who lived about 800 years before Christ, you might think it has nothing to do with us. In fact, it has everything to do with us, because it tells us something about our own responsibility, and it tells us something about how God acts when we turn back to him. It is a story of hope. It is a story of getting your life back on track. It is a story of God's grace and mercy. The sermon is called A Mid-Course Correction. And I think it's a story that would be really interesting for anyone. If you know someone who needs some hope, if you know someone who's in the wrong place and needs to figure out how to get to a better place, if you know someone who needs to hear about God's love, this is a great sermon to bring them to. A Mid-Course Correction is the title of the sermon. In Acts class, we are in Acts chapter 8 this week. We're talking about Philip going around and preaching, and he's going to preach to a man from Ethiopia. He's going to teach a man who is looking for the truth. And Philip's going to share that truth with him, and the guy is going to respond. And that entire story tells us a lot about how we approach people with the message of Christ, and it tells us a lot about how we're to respond to the truth when we hear it. So there's going to be lots to talk about in there. Acts chapter 8, we might even get into Acts chapter 9, the story of Saul's conversion too. So if you like reading ahead, that's where we are. Once again, I love stories. I've got some really good stories to tell you in the sermon. Not only the biblical story, but some other examples as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a great Sunday. Hope to see you there.